Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me today. I'm going to share my summer reading list with you today. Even though it's already mid-September, I'm a bit late with it, but what can you do? This summer was especially interesting in terms of books because I have an exam coming up. I'm doing my master's degree in English literature at the moment, and I have an exam coming up in 2 weeks about children's literature. So I spent the whole summer reading up on the reading list. It was amazing because, as I said, it was children's literature, and I love children's literature anyway, so that was a good match. But I'm also going to share with you a couple of other videos, what am I talking about? A couple of other books in the video that I've bought and read. I will not give extensive reviews on them because I will do that individually for each book. So I usually do, on every book that I read, I do a little review either here on this YouTube channel or on floatingtheboat.weebly.com, but I will leave it in the description box linked below so that you can find everything that you need. Yes, but let's get started. I have no clue in which order I've read them anymore, but I think I started with the classics Peter Pan, J.M. Barrie and Winnie the Pooh, A.A. Milne. Both of them I've read before and I've loved them, and I still do, but Peter Pan was painstakingly sexist now that I've read it, with supposedly feminine eyes during the Me Too movement, in times of the Me Too movement. So Wendy is really annoying. She's only talking about, I don't know, sewing and cleaning and stuff and mermaids. It's a classic. I think everyone should have read it, especially if you deem yourself to be some sort of interested in English literature. This is definitely something to read. And yeah, this one is the Modern Library Classics edition, which is quite lovely. It has great little illustrations in it. And if I find this exact edition on Amazon, I will just link to it below in the description box, as I will link to my blog and other pages that might be, websites that might be of interest. Well, moving on to Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is definitely, I think, one of the best children's stories that are around. It's really a masterpiece of cuteness. I absolutely love the book. This is a Puffin Modern Classics edition. Again, I will link to it down below. Lovely illustrations in it. And it's also, I don't know about you, but for me, books that are written or are printed in a weird format, I really have trouble reading those. But this one is really nice, you know, it's very, I don't know, it's just like the font is big enough and sort of a bit fatter than usual font, so like a bit bolder, and that is, I think, very, very nice to read, and definitely one of the stories to revisit again and again and again, even as a grown-up, especially when you've grown up with it like me. So yes, definitely one of the great books that I've read this summer. Then on the reading list, there was also the first book of the 13 book series, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. So this is The Bad Beginning. I'm a huge fan of the Unfortunate Events series. I've read all of them before. I've reread this book, obviously, this summer, because it's going to be a part of my exam. And I fell in love with it all over again. It's so quirky and it's so, I don't know, the details, and I love it. So what I love about children's literature is that, and it's like the same in The Bad Beginning, is that that very often, and in a more sort of direct way than adult literature sometimes manages to do, they deal with complex truths about humanity and about, I don't know, just some human themes that recur and I think this is here. I mean, obviously, it's a little bit exaggerated in this book, but then on the other hand, is it really? Because I think it's just a story that really sort of shows how adults think and how children more than often have to suffer in our world because they're just not being heard and not being taken seriously in the first place. So yes, that is definitely one. And I mean, it's a 13 book series, but they're rather short and handy, so I think they're perfect for children also that are probably not such good readers and don't want to read massive, you know, I don't know, tomes. Then one of my sort of gems of the summer is Sarah Crossman's The Weight of Water. It was on my reading list, and it's written in a sort of weird verse-ish way. It's not in rhyme. I think sometimes it is, but it's generally not in rhyme. It also doesn't really feel like poetry. It's more like prose put in verse form, if that makes any sense. And it was interesting because I opened the book and I was like, oh, come on, just write normal. You know, I was like, I'm quite suspicious with these special books, you know, I'm like always like, why don't you just write normal fiction? But it is such a beautiful story. So it is basically the story of a Polish teenager who comes to Britain with her mother to basically hunt down the father who has walked out on them. And it's sort of written in little sort of, you could call them chapters, but not really chapters. So for example, here you have the bell, and then there's a short text about the school bell. So for example, there's a bell, a pealing chime to signal when everyone moves. We're ruled by its shrillness, like sleepwalkers we stand when it clangs, and return to silence at its command. Teachers try to lead the processions. I will decide when the lesson ends, they insist, but they cannot compete with the bell. So it is actually quite poetry-ish. I think this idea of migration, but from a very different perspective, I think, because nowadays it's all about, you know, people from Syria and people from Turkey and things like that. But this is from a girl from Poland, and I can't find it now. I should have sort of bookmarked it, but there's this part where she says, the children don't want to play with me because I'm too white, which I think is very interesting. That you also apparently can be too white, like the wrong kind of white, Polish white, Eastern white. And yes, so I really love that. It was shortlisted for the Silib Carnegie Medal 2013, and I think rightfully so. It's a really beautiful book, and if you want to find out what happens to Kasienka, go and buy it. It's a really good read, and it doesn't take you too long to get through because A, it's rather a slim book, and B, as you see, like the pages are not really printed to the rim, so that is a really nice and pleasant read for a rainy afternoon in autumn as well. Be lovely. Right, next on my list is Philip Pullman's Northern Lights. I actually do have a review on that already on YouTube, and it's not the best review of all. I don't really know what to make out of this book. I know it's an international bestseller, I know everyone is over the moon with it, and I didn't really like it, I have to say. It's a trilogy, or I think at least. I think it's a trilogy, or quadrilogy. I think it's a trilogy. Let's just settle for trilogy. And I didn't read on, which I think shows a lot about, well, look, what I think of it. And for me, the biggest problem was, and as I said, if you want to have extensive reviews on that, just I will leave the review linked below as well. I thought the characters were very unrelatable. That was the biggest problem I had with it. Very often it was I just didn't care. I didn't care about the characters. I really didn't, especially not about Lyra. I thought she was horrible, absolutely horrible character. And not even, you know, I'm not saying that every character has to be, you know, rainbows and sunshine, but she was unrelatable. Like, I don't know, you have people like Secret Garden, where you also have a spoiled child, but you sort of, because of the backstory, you do understand why, and you sort of feel sorry for that, and you understand why she is the way she is. But with Lyra, she's just obnoxious and horrible, and I really didn't like her at all. And also the villains, I thought they were not really fleshed out at all. I didn't really care if the evil people won or the good people won, and careful spoiler alert for the end. The only time I felt sort of compassionate was when Roger died. But basically only also because I was so angry with Lyra, because if she hadn't made this detour up to her stupid uncle / father, he would still be alive. So that was the only reason, and I was still angry with Lyra because she was so stupid. And yes, that was basically that. I'm also not going to read it on, if I'm honest. The thing, I don't know, on the one hand, I like the idea that everything was reversed, so the sort of privileged people are black and the poor enslaved people are white. But then I also thought it was quite unoriginal. I was like, oh, I get it, it's reversed, okay. So that, I think, was not entirely my cup of tea. I barely could stand the unfairness of the book, so I think the author has made a great job of sort of pointing at the injustice and of the horrendous circumstances that suppressed races have to endure. Is really terrible. It also made me cry towards the end, and I'm going to say here, spoiler alert, when Callum was hanged. Yeah. That actually is still bothering me, if I'm honest with you. It's really bothering me, and I'm quite angry with both of them, because, I don't know, it was probably meant to be romantic, but I don't know. But it is a really, really good read, especially if you are into sort of dystopian, into sort of social injustice, political, subtle illusions. This is definitely a great book. And the characters are quite lovable as well. I mean, Sephi is sometimes rather obnoxious and rather ignorant, but then again she grows up in a very privileged world, and yes. The last book I want to talk about from my reading list today is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. It's now so the movie was released recently. I haven't seen it, if I'm honest, but yeah, the first thing I want to say about this is that the format, this is Broadway Books, the format of this book is very awkward. It is very high, quite thick, and the pages are very weirdly shaped, I think. They're far, you know, wider, they're not broad enough for their length. It's just a weird book format, I think. And that annoyed me a little bit in the beginning, but I got over it. This book, I've had a couple of problems with it, if I'm honest. The first one being that I'm sort of getting a little bit over dystopian young adult literature. I think it's like, okay, we get the message, life is crappy, find a new niche, because everywhere, starting from the Hunger Games, which I've enjoyed a lot, you have so many dystopian books, especially with teenagers now, Elysium, and like, I think that was just a movie, I don't know, and this one thing with the colours, was it called I don't know, would have to check out. And the Divergent and stuff, all of that, the Maze Runner, it's like, you know, lots and lots written in dystopian worlds. And this one doesn't manage, or didn't manage for me, to get myself into it, really. You know, when I compare it to a book like The Hunger Games, I was really hung up on the details. It was really beautiful to read. I related to Katniss. I related to the world they live in. It was well described. Part of the problem might be that I'm not interested in video games at all. It's not my domain. It's not my cup of tea. I really dislike video games a lot. And I wasn't quite sure what the author wanted to do. Does he want to point out that video games making us into zombies, or that they are a great way to escape the world? Or, like, I didn't quite get what his stand was on video games. But I think he's a huge geek himself, so probably he plays a lot of himself. He has to, otherwise there's a lot of information about video games. Secondly, it is set in the future, but it is basically set in the 1980s, which I think is a bit of a weird way to do it. And the Oasis is described very much in detail, I think too much in detail. It is really like exactly how it was coded, and you know, how they managed, like, I don't know, I can't even talk about it because I have no clue. But I just feel like unless you are a huge computer geek, this is too much information. It really is. It sometimes reads like a manual rather than a book. And also, which is very interesting, because at the moment I'm reading Solstein's on writing, and he says that you should not give sort of expositional chunks in your book that just describe what you're doing, but you should rather let the reader explore the world through the eyes of the narrator or of the main character. Something that, for example, in Northern Lights, I think is done splendidly. There's never an expositional chunk of like, oh, this is the world, how it functions. We have demons for our souls. It's just through the story you slowly realize what is going on. Klein doesn't manage to do that, I think, very well. There are huge expositional chunks in between that do not relate to this plot at all. It's just in the middle, like, okay, and now I'm going to tell you the story of James Halliday, or what's his name. And then you just have basically like a wiki page of James Halliday, and it's not even put inside the plot. It's not even that, I don't know, the main character reads on a wiki page or anything like that. It's just really, ta-da, this is it. This is what is happening. And I thought that was rather lazily done, and it could have been done better. Having said that, as I said, it's a lot of details, how he wins in this and this computer game. It's really, really boring, and I really found myself jumping whole sections where I was like, okay, computer game shit, computer game shit, computer game shit, computer game shit. And I'm sorry, excuse my French. And yeah, as I said, I think if you were born in the 80s, if you were young in the 80s, you're a massive geek. Basically, if you're Ernest Cline, you will enjoy this book. I actually don't know if he was young in the 1980s, but I think if you love the 80s pop culture and video games, and you enjoy reading about old computer softwares, hardwares, what have you, it's going to be an enjoyable read. If not, be prepared to jump a lot in between the plot or through technical details and stuff that are rather unnecessary. Alright, moving on to my personal list, which is amazing. So I spent the summer in London and Ipswich working, and I seized the opportunity to go to Waterstones and buy the second book of the Uncommoners, where I loved the first one. It's by Jennifer Bell. It's called The Smoking Hourglass. I have to be honest with you, I haven't finished it quite, so I cannot say too much on the plot, which I don't want to do anyway. but I really, really love this book. First of all, it has great little illustrations in it, really nice. And secondly, it's just so beautifully written, I think, and it's sort of this genre of traditional British children's literature that I just adore. It's in a magical realm of Londonor, and it's, I don't know, it's just, the main character is this really sort of geeky, but not computer geeky, but sort of exceptional, different, Hermione Granger-ish character whom you just fall in love with, and you really like her, and she's relatable, and it has such great attention to detail without being overbearing, and I really, really enjoy reading it, because for me it's just one of these places, it's a bit like a safe place, you know, it is children's book enough so that you know it's not going to be massively horrible things happen, like your main character getting hanged. Thank you very much, Noughts and Crosses, for the nightmares. And it's sort of this mystery, what is happening, and then you find a magical object, and then you have to find out what kind of object it is and stuff, and it's just so beautifully done, I think. So kudos to Jennifer Bell, and I think that is probably my favourite book, which is weird to say because I haven't finished it, but that was because I had to finish my reading list, obviously. And highly recommend this one. I think, if I'm not mistaken, yes, I think Jennifer Bell is the one. Am I right? Is there like a bio? I don't know. About the illustrator. That's more helpful. About the author, exactly. So Jennifer Bell actually used to work at the bookseller Foyles, which you may know if you live in the UK, or I don't know where Foyles is also available. But they're one of the biggest book chains, and there she actually worked in the children's book section, so she really knows her stuff, and then was inspired to write The Crooked Sixpence, which is the first book of those, and it's just really a really great book. I'm sorry, I'm slightly repetitive now with saying how great it is, but it's just, I don't know, it's just British children's literature at its best, I think. So get that one definitely on your reading list for autumn. And if you're already going to bookstore, you might also, and you like sort of stories like that, because it's quite similar in the idea of it, I think. I also got the second book of the Cogheart Adventure by Peter Bundle. Equally enchanting. It has like, it's quite similar in terms of that it also has a strong-minded female character. It has a lovable boy I don't want to say sidekick, because it's actually more than a sidekick, but character. And this one is lovely because it sort of fuses, it's not magic, but it fuses sort of 19th century technology with sort of a children's story. And like Northern Lights, I would say it sort of is put in an alternative reality, which is also set in London and real English places, with a little twist here and there. So they have zeppelins, and they have a lot is about cogs. So what they have is they have sort of robots that help them. They're called mechanical. So the foxes are mechanical, which is, I think, or mechanimal. Is that how it's called? God, I should really do my research, shouldn't I? So basically, you sort of wind them up, and then the cogs start working, and then they come alive. So it's just really cool if you sort of also, I think also when you read this to a child, it's amazing because you can sort of get into technology and 19th century stuff and so on quite easily with it, which is amazing. And the main character is called Lily, which is always good because I love that name. It's one of my favourite names. And just that on the side, I know it shouldn't be a criterion if it comes to choosing a book, but it actually is. I have a lot of books where the main character is Lily. I might actually do, I could actually do a video on all the books that I own where the main character is Lily. We'll see. Anyway, this one, as I said, Moonlocket by Peter Bunzel, is also highly recommendable. I mean, look at the cover, isn't it gorgeous? It's absolutely beautiful, I think. I mean, just the cover wants you to buy it, which I think is very important, because I have to say that I bought the book because of the cover. So what I usually do is I go into a bookstore and then I sort of peruse the cover and I look at the covers, take the ones out that I like best, and then have a look inside. And if the inside intrigues me as much as the outside, I usually go and buy it. Yeah. Right. The last book that is sort of, well, it's not fiction, it's non-fiction that I've read this summer is The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. I've been following Gretchen on her blog for quite some time. I really like her, I really like her writing, and I decided to get this book now, and I loved it. I loved it. It's personal, it's witty, it's funny, it's relatable, and it has really helped me to sort of get on with my own stuff and to make myself I don't know, to make myself happier. Goodness, what is happening with my hair? So I would really, really, if you like a light read, but not light in terms of not high quality, but just something where you just can unwind and relax, get this book. It is really, really well written, and it is sort of a bit like a mixture of say a memoir and personal life story, and it's not really an advice book, which I like. I really like it. It's not like do this, do that, but it's like I've done this and it's helped me tremendously and this is what happened, but I'm not imposing it on you and you don't have to do it this way. But it's absolutely gorgeous, I think. Really, really well done, and I'm going to start my happiness project. I'm actually starting it at the moment, but I think I'm going to prepare it now and then get on with it in January and hopefully have as much success with it as Gretchen did. And I think it's going to be really amazing. So kudos to that. Good. So that's The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. 2 more books that I want to show you, just from a book haul that I've got. I am really happy to present this. I've been coveting this for quite some time. So this is Children's Writers and Artists Yearbook 2019. I've been writing children's literature for quite some time. I've not really thought about publishing it, but now I've got this and I'm going to work my way through until I find someone who wants to publish my books, and so I'm really excited to have this. This book, I also have the sort of grown-up edition, is amazing. It does not only have all of the addresses and sort of what you should send in and what not, of all agents and publishing houses and so on, not only in the UK but also overseas, but it also has huge sections of like how to write a cover letter and notes from a children's laureate, and so you have sort of essays from fantastic published authors. I don't know, it's just so much info in it. How to write a picture book, where to start, finding your thread, staying true to life, etc., using humour. It's just such a great book, and I think it comes at about, I don't know, between 20 and 30 pounds, so it's really an amazing bargain, and I would recommend it to anyone who's considering publishing either the sort of the normal version or the children's book version. And also on the note of writing, I've got Kenneth Romans and Joel Rafelson, Writing That Works. I was recommended this by my writing coach. It's really, I've not read completely through it, but I think it's highly, highly helpful. I can highly recommend it. It is not about fiction, so it's more about emails, letters, memos, presentations, speeches and stuff, but I think anybody would, really benefit from that, because I think being able to write a good email, whatever you do, is very important. But obviously as a freelance writer, it's it's really, really crucial that you know how to sell yourself in an email and stuff, and how to write good copy as well. And it has lots and lots of examples in it, how to do it, how not to do it. It has, yeah, so here for example we have an example of a letter with little notes on the side. We have like vague versus specific, bad versus good. So there's a lot of real sort of real life experience and what not to do. And there's also somewhere, yes, so for example you have little lists at the end with vocabulary that works great in this category. So that is really a winner, and it's not so thick. You can really work with it very well, take it everywhere you go, and I would really highly recommend it to anyone who wants to improve their writing. But yeah, so that is basically my summer list. That was my summer list. I'm going to do repeated videos on my autumn books that I'm going to read, but probably these two will be reviewed then as well, because by then I hopefully will have finished them. I will try to upload all of the reviews on the other books to give you a more extensive look into them if you're interested. And yeah, so for today, thank you for watching, and I'm sure we're going to keep reading. I think one of the books at least should really entice you, and have a great time reading, and I'll see you soon.